think everybody knows the story of Grandfather Bhīṣma. Yes? Grandfather Bhīṣma? Bhīṣma? No? Oh. Pandavas. Pandavas, their father was Pandu. That's why they're Pandavas. But Pandu died when they were teenagers. Pandu was living in the forest. He was the king, but he liked being in the forest. So the 5 sons were born in the forest. He died. Vyasadeva recommended go back to Hastinapur. Kunti, the mother. Madri, the other wife, she entered into the funeral pyre, leaving Kunti to take care of her 5 bustling boys. And when they got back to Hastinapur, there was no father, so grandfather took care of the children. And grandfather was Bhīṣma. Bhīṣma. Long story. Give a little background on Grandfather Bhīṣma. You've heard of Vishnu Sahasranam, right? One of the 1,000 names is Vasumana. Vasumana means one of the names of Krishna is that he was always thinking of Vasumana. That Vasumana is referring to Bhīṣma. Bhīṣma was always thinking of Krishna. Krishna is always thinking of Bhīṣma. There's a nice story. One time Yudhishthira, Krishna was visiting in Indraprastha. Indraprastha was the capital of the Pandavas before he became the emperor of the world. So, Krishna was visiting, and Krishna and Yudhishthira were cousins. Arjuna and Krishna were cousins. They were cousins because the Pandava's mother and Krishna's father were brother and sister. Krishna's father, Vasudeva. Vasudeva and Devaki. Krishna was born in the prison house of Kamsa as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki. Vasudeva was the brother, Kunti was the sister. So they're cousins. Although they were cousins, Yudhishthira accepted Krishna as the personality of Godhead, and he always offered him respect. So one morning he went to see Krishna, and Krishna was in meditation. So he didn't disturb him. Came back later, he was still in meditation. He came back later, he was still in meditation. Finally he came back and Krishna had finished his meditation. So Yudhishthira asked him, "May I inquire who was it that you were meditating upon?" He said, "Grandfather Bhīṣma." Why? Because he's always meditating upon me. And so I'm meditating upon him. Vasu, Mana. He's called Vasu because before he was Grandfather Bhīṣma, he had a different name. His different name was Deva Vrata, who was born as the 8th son of King Santanu and Ganga. Long story how that happened. After the 8th, they'll skip the long story here. After Deva Vrata was born, because Ganga had agreed to become the queen of Santanu on one condition. The condition was, you never object to whatever I do. Pretty nice marriage arrangement, right? You never object to what I do. He agreed. And so the first 7 children that were born, right after they were born, she threw them in the Ganges. Now Ganga threw the children in the Ganges and they died. He didn't say anything. But the 8th child, that was too much. Stop. Okay, that's it. I'm leaving. She went away for some 12, 13 years. She had the child trained by Vashishta in scripture, by Parashuram in military science, and there's other teachers that are identified. Then one day, Santanu was hunting in the forest. He was passing by the Ganges, and the water of the Ganges had almost become stopped. What's that? The Ganges is always very swift moving. So intuitively understood, that must be my son. So he went closer and he saw a young teenager using mystic missiles had stopped the flow of the Ganges. Ganga came, took the boy by his hand, brought the boy, introduced him to his father, that this is your son. His name is Devavrata, and he's been trained very nicely, and my service here is now finished. I'm returning to the celestial realm. And poof, she went away. So the son, now a teenage boy, and his father, Santanu, were steadfast, always in each other's association. So many things happened. But so that we're skipping those many things. Bhīṣma got the name Bhīṣma instead of Devavrata because he took a very intense vow. You know about the vow? The vow. His father, Santanu, King Santanu, no longer had a wife. One day he was passing through the forest and he smelled this amazing fragrance like musk. Going for long distance, he followed the fragrance and came to a place where there was a fisherman. And the fisherman's daughter not only was the source of the fragrance, but she was very beautiful. And Cupid's arrow struck. He desired very much to have the hand in marriage of the fisherman's daughter. See, he requests the fisherman, I'd like to marry your daughter. I'm the king. May I have your daughter's hand in marriage? And the fisherman said, no. What? You're a fisherman. I'm the king. I can't marry your daughter? He said, no. Why not? Because it's been foretold that my daughter will have a son who will become the next king. And you already have a son. Devavrata. So he was a dharmic king. He didn't just like assert himself. And so he went back to his kingdom and was love-struck. He wasn't behaving in his normal, powerful, kingly manner. And his very close son wanted to know why. He asked the ministers said why. So Devavrata decided to go visit the fisherman and said, my dear fisherman, I understand you don't want your daughter to marry my father because he already has a firstborn son. That's me. He said, yes. So I'll take a vow. I won't become king. Can my father now marry your daughter? He said, no. Why not? Because if you marry and your son is born first before my daughter, then your son will become king. That's the law. And said, very well, I'll take a vow. And not only won't become king, but I won't marry for the rest of my life. Okay, my daughter can marry your father. So when Deva Vrata went back and informed his father that the fisherman consented with these two promises, the father was amazed. You've sacrificed like this for me? So his father gave him another name, Bhīṣma, one of strong vow or terrible vow. And he gave him another benediction, a benediction that he wouldn't have to die unless he chose. Whenever it was that he chose to die, that's when he would die. So we're reading from Canto 1, Chapter 9, where Grandfather Bhīṣma is parting by his own choice. And that's Chapter 9. It's the passing of Grandfather Bhīṣma. We heard in the earlier section of the chapter, Bhīṣma, there's many, many, many intrigues involved, but Bhīṣma was lying on a bed of arrows. Lying on a bed of arrows means during the battle, his body was riddled with arrows, so many arrows that he couldn't even lie on the ground. The arrows were pierced through from one side to the other side of his body, and he was lying on a bed of arrows. But he hadn't chosen to leave his body, so as much pain as he was in, he didn't give up his body. And after the Kurukshetra battle was finished, the funeral arrangements were made for all the deceased soldiers on both sides. Yudhisthira was then anointed the next king, and in their royal attire, the five brothers, headed by Yudhisthira, and Krishna, and many, 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 many other sages and royalty, they came to see Grandfather Bhīṣma and give their encouragement to him upon the likely departure from this world. And the situation was, after the Kurukshetra battle, Yudhisthira was feeling terrible. Because of me, so I can become king. So many thousands of soldiers have died, left their bodies. What a wretched person I am. No, he wasn't wanting the kingdom, he was wanting what Krishna wanted. But his sense of contrition was so strong that he had forgotten that it was done because Krishna wanted it done. So, Bhīṣma, Krishna tried to pacify Grandfather Bhīṣma, and purposefully he was not successful. Could you do this? Could you turn that fan that way? Great, thanks. Because Krishna wanted Grandfather Bhīṣma to get the credit, the honor of being able to pacify to pacify Yudhisthira. So he did. It's a long section, many, many, many things Bhīṣma said to Yudhisthira that brought about his relief from his distress, rather than repeating those messages, because it's about 15 verses. He's now settled on the fact that Krishna wanted this, and that's why it happened. There were demoniac kings, it was Krishna's plan. Who can understand Krishna's plan? Many great sages and this and that, and who can understand? but it was what he wanted. You know that's what he wanted. He insisted. And Arjuna also, Krishna insisted. Just like at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna insisted. Because he wanted to remove the demoniac kings from the surface of the earth before Krishna departed this world, because he came for one, that was one of his purposes. So his purpose was fulfilled. The Pandavas were instruments, and they had no cause for lamentation. He wants you to rule. The world is awaiting your rule. Rule. Because that's what Krishna wants. So then, next section, Bhīṣma said, if I'm going to rule, could you instruct me how to rule? How to rule the world? What are my duties and how to carry out my duties? And long, in Mahabharata, Bhīṣma Parva, it's a huge section, the duties of a Kshatriya. In the Bhagavatam, it's more principle-based, it's more succinct. And then, when he finished that instruction about ruling the earth, comes the next section. The next section is the sun moved in the northern direction. So when was Bhagavad Gita spoken and the Kurukshetra battle took place? Bhagavad Gita was spoken in the month of December, Gita Jayanti. And then the battle was 18 days, and after the battle there was funerals, and then the anointing of the king. And by Makara Sankranti is when the sun starts moving in the northern direction. And that's when Grandfather Bhīṣma, being a yogi, I mean, he was a transcendentalist, he could have picked any time, but that was the time he selected. So he stopped speaking. He withdrew his senses from the normal course of extending the senses into the world, into the object of the senses for service, and he consolidated his senses and his mind contemplating Krishna. He's had many verses where he was speaking about the kindness of Krishna, the beauty of Krishna. So he's seeing Krishna's face. He's not just describing what he sees before him, but he's describing that feature of Krishna that he saw during the battle, Parthasarathi, the chariot driver of Arjuna. Partha Sarathi, the chariot driver of Arjuna. There's some very celebrated Parthasarathi temples. Parthasarathi. And he goes into detail describing what he saw, because we discussed this at length. The primary relationship that Bhīṣma had in relation to Krishna was dasya rasa. Arjuna was his friend, Sakya. Bhīṣma was his servant, dasya. But as servant, he also knew that Krishna liked the secondary rasa of chivalry, so he took the side of being in opposition to Krishna and in opposition to Arjuna. And so when Bhīṣma took a vow, there's some details. Bhīṣma took a vow. Tomorrow, either Krishna will break his vow, because I've never broken my vow, but he made me break my vow. There's some detail. Or or I will kill Arjuna. Now, Bhīṣma knew he can't kill Arjuna. In Krishna's presence, he can't kill Arjuna. But he also knew that Krishna holds the affection for his devotee above even his own word. So Bhīṣma fought so fiercely that Krishna broke his vow. He took the broken chariot wheel of Arjuna when Bhīṣma was ready to fire arrows at Arjuna and started charging with the broken chariot wheel raised in his hand. That's what Bhīṣmadeva is describing. His hair and face were ashen due to the dust raised by the hooves of the horses on the battlefield. There was perspiration moving down the side of his forehead because it was intense in battle. His upper garment was sailing behind him because he was running so fast it fell off. His eyes were like as bright red as the setting sun. His body was showing the wounds from the sharp arrows of Bhīṣmadeva. And when Krishna came like that, Bhīṣma dropped his weapons. Because that's what he wanted. He didn't want to kill Arjuna. He wanted to show that Krishna holds protecting his devotee above everything. Bhaktavatsala. So it describes that vision, and he was praying, may I always remember that feature of Krishna at the time of death. And Krishna standing right before him. But that's the meditation that Grandfather Bhīṣma has. Here's the last verse that I read. It's the last verse that he speaks. No, not the last verse that he speaks. Text 41. At the Rajasuya Yagya performed by Maharaj Yudhisthira, there was the greatest assembly of all the elite men of the world, the royal and learned orders. And in that great assembly, Lord Sri Krishna was worshipped by one and all as the most exalted personality of Godhead. This happened during my presence, and I remembered the incident in order to keep my mind upon the Lord. Just yesterday, we had a 2-hour class with the Chinese devotees on the event just preceding the Rajasuya Yagya. Rajasuya Yagya has a particular feature to it. The feature it's called Agni Yagya, and the Agni Yagya is oblations into the fire are offered in honor of the most celebrated, esteemed person in the assembly. Yudhisthira wanted the Rajasuya Yagya for that reason. Not that he wanted to become king. He wanted all the personalities, Duryodhana and company, and even the demigods, everybody to understand who's the superlative person. And what's the outcome for those who take shelter of him, what's the outcome of those who don't. It's very clear in that chapter 72. However, there's a requirement for Rajasuya Yagya, and that's all the kings on the surface of the earth have to pay tribute in the form of tax to the emperor. He's the emperor amongst kings. And if they disagree, they don't want to give the tax, they don't want to submit to him, then battle. So the 4 brothers were sent in the 4 directions, and everyone submitted except for one person, Jarasandha. Uddhava, you know who is Uddhava? Uddhava is another cousin in the royal family. There's Vasudeva, Krishna's father, Krishna and Balaram, their father. There's the sister, Kunti, there are some other sisters. And there was another brother. The other brother's name was Devabhaga. Devabhaga's son was Uddhava. Uddhava, like Arjuna, superlative personality. So much so that Krishna would ask for Uddhava's advice, and he would do what Uddhava recommended, like a minister. But from royal family, but he wasn't the fighting kind, he was the minister kind. So Uddhava made the recommendation, yes, the Rajasuya should be performed, but you just received a messenger on behalf of 20,000 kings that were all imprisoned by Jarasandha, who was planning to have a human sacrifice to Mahabhairava of the 20,000 kings to satisfy Lord Shiva. They sent a messenger asking for your protection. You want to protect those who surrender to you. And Yudhishthira wants you to come for his Rajasuya. You first have to eliminate Jarasandha, because you can't do the Rajasuya unless all kings submit. So you're going to have to deal with Jarasandha. And Jarasandha is as powerful as 10,000 elephants. That's what Uddhava said. Uddhava had learned, Uddhava's guru was Bhīṣmadeva, who is the same as the guru of the demigods. Bhīṣmadeva trained Uddhava in many things, but one of the many things was Jyotisha. And through Jyotisha, he understood all kinds of things about Jarasandha. He said he can't be defeated by an ordinary person. Only Bhīma is equal in strength. He should fight him. But he can't fight him in a battlefield with Jarasandha's vast armies. It wouldn't be good. It should be one-to-one combat. And how to engage Jarasandha in one-to-one combat? He is well known as giving charity to Brahmanas. So Bhīma should go in the disguise as a Brahmana, ask for charity, and the charity is in fight. And if you're there, Bhīma will win. And Jarasandha will lose. But otherwise he won't be able to defeat Jarasandha alone. So that's what happened. The long description. But Jarasandha was killed after 27 days of fighting with clubs and bashing with their iron fists, iron-like fists. 27 days, Bhīma finally said, "Oh Madhava, I can't defeat him." So Krishna didn't say anything. He just took a twig, little piece of a branch that split in two, and he just went and bifurcated it in two. Because Jarasandha was given the name Jarasandha because two halves of a child were born to the king, to the two queens of the king. The king of Magadha, I was just looking at this in a map. Where is Magadha? Or, because it was in relation to the place where the high seat of learning of Buddhism was also in the same state. Magadha is in, what's the state? Today's state in India of Bihar. So Nalanda is the place where the most eminent of the Buddhist monastery teachers resided for 110 years. It's a long story. And so Magadha is just kind of northwest of Nalanda. But prior to Buddhism, during Krishna's time, the kingdom was Magadha, Magadesh. So the king of Magadha had no children. He went to the forest, and one rishi, after seeing him engaging in intense austerities, asked, what is it that you want? I'm performing austerities so my queens can have a child. He gave the king a mango, said, give this to your queens and they'll have children. So he cut the mango in two. Each queen took half. Later they became pregnant, and each one gave birth to half a child. And the king was shocked. So he threw the halves of the child away. When demoness named Jara, she was a Rakshasi, she was going to eat them, but she just out of curiosity put the two halves together and became a whole. And she had heard these were the halves of the king, so she took them to the king. Here's your son. He was very grateful. And she said, I just have one request. Name the child after me. So he did. Jarasandha. And Jarasandha was very, very powerful. So when Krishna broke this little twig, he didn't say anything. He just gestured. Bhima understood. He threw him to the ground, ripped his one leg as he held the other leg to the ground, and he was split in half. End of Jarasandha. And that meant that the Rajasuya could be performed. And the 20,000 kings could be let out of prison. They were very happy. The wives of the queens, the kings, were very happy. And then the Rajasuya Yagya was performed. At the Rajasuya Yagya, Yudhishthira called upon Bhīṣma, to select the most honored person in this assembly. And of course it was Krishna. So that's what this verse is. And the assembly was massive assembly. The most learned people, the most influential people on earth. And they all heard Bhīṣma's glorification of Krishna as a supreme person. And everyone was happy except for one. Shishupal. So that's here. After gaining the purport by Srila Prabhupada, after gaining victory in the battle of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhishthira, the emperor of the world, performed the Rajasuya sacrificial ceremony. The emperor in those days, upon his ascendance to the throne, would send a challenge horse all over the world to declare his supremacy, and any ruling prince or king was at liberty to accept the challenge and express his tacit willingness either to obey or disobey the supremacy of the particular emperor. One who accepted the challenge had to fight with the emperor and establish his own supremacy by victory. The defeated challenger would have to sacrifice his life, making a place for another king or ruler. So Maharaj Yudhishthira also dispatched such challenging horses all over the world, and every ruling prince and king all over the world accepted Maharaj Yudhishthira's leadership as the emperor of the world. After this, all rulers of the world under the regime of Maharaj Yudhishthira were invited to participate in the great sacrificial ceremony of Rajasuya. Such performances required hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was not an easy job for a petty king. Such a sacrificial ceremony being too expensive and also too difficult to perform under present circumstances, is now impossible in this age of Kali, nor can anyone secure the required expert priesthood to take charge of the ceremony. Paragraph. So, after being invited, all the kings and the great learned sages of the world assembled at the capital of Maharaj Yudhisthira. The learned society, including the great philosophers, religionists, physicians, scientists, and all great sages, were invited. That is to say, the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas were the topmost leading men in society, and they were all invited to participate in the assembly. The Vaishyas and Shudras were unimportant elements in society, and they are not mentioned herein. Due to the change of social activities in the modern age, the importance of men has also changed in terms of occupational positions. Paragraph. So, in that great assembly, Lord Sri Krishna was the cynosure of neighboring eyes. Everyone wanted to see Lord Krishna, and everyone wanted to pay his humble respects to the Lord. Bhīṣmadeva remembered all this and was glad that his worshipful Lord, the personality of Godhead, was present before him in his actual formal presence. So, to meditate on the Supreme Lord is to meditate on the activities, form, pastimes, name, and fame of the Lord. That is easier than what is imagined as meditation on the impersonal feature of the Supreme. In Bhagavad Gita 12.5, it is clearly stated that to meditate upon the impersonal feature of the Supreme is very difficult. It is practically no meditation, or simply a waste of time, because very seldom is the desired result obtained. The devotees, however, meditate upon the Lord's factual form and pastimes, and therefore the Lord is easily approachable by the devotees. This is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita 12.9. The Lord is non-different from his transcendental activities. It is indicated also in this shloka that Lord Sri Krishna, while actually present before human society, especially in connection with the battle of Kurukshetra, was accepted as the greatest personality of the time. Although he might not have been recognized as Supreme Personality of Godhead, the propaganda of a very great man, the propaganda that a very great man is worshipped as God after his death is misleading, because a man after his death cannot be made into God. Nor can the personality of Godhead be a human being, even when he was personally present. Both ideas are misconceptions. The idea of anthropomorphism cannot be applicable in the case of Lord Krishna. Anthropomorphism. You know the meaning? Some idea? Anthropomorphism? Anthropology. So anthropology is the study of mankind. So anthropomorphism is an ism, a teaching, that God is imagined to be like man is. Anthropomorphism is an ideology that says persons imagine God to be like they are, like man. Anthropomorphism. It's the other way around. Man is created, Prabhupada would repeat this, it's in the Bible, man is created in the image of God. That is to say, because God has an image, man is created in the image. God isn't created in the image of man. Man is created in the image of God. God isn't created, otherwise he's not God. So it's just an imaginary fiction. God is like man. It's the other way around. Man is created, and the image of God is Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha. Vigraha means form. And Sat Chit Ananda are the features of that form: eternality, knowledge, and bliss. Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha. There's a nice verse in the introductory verse, the invocation verse in Sri Brahma Samhita, well known. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchit Ananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Sarva Karana Karanam, he's the cause of all causes. He's the, amongst Ishwaras, he's the Parama Ishwara. He's the Ishwara of all Ishwaras. Ishwara Parama, and who is that? Krishna. And Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha, his form is eternality, Sat, knowledge, Chit, and bliss, Ananda. Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha, the personality of Godhead, has form. Not a material form, not an anthropomorphic, imagined to be like us, maybe like mankind form, but an eternal spiritual form from which the temporary worldly forms are fashioned in the likeness of. Anadir, Adir. He has no beginning, and he's the beginning of everything else. Anadir, Adir, Govinda, specifically Krishna, who's the lover of cows and the brahmanas. Another nice prayer of glorifying Krishna. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagatitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Krishna is celebrated for being very affectionate to the cows and the brahmanas. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go, cows, Brahmana, the brahmanas, Hitaya Cha, the lover and protector of the cows and the brahmanas. Govindaya Namo Namaha. Now before the Kurukshetra battle, the way that the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1, and this is Prabhupada's purport for verse number 41. But in Canto 10, chapter 73, Yudhisthira is still in Indraprastha, and the Kurukshetra battle hasn't happened yet. I think. Kurukshetra battle hasn't happened yet. Krishna's... It's okay. Noise? Noise? I'm trying to sort out the chronology here. Because at that stage, just after Jarasandha was killed, is when the Rajasuya Yajna was performed. So rather than going into it, I think I'm going to do some research before tomorrow evening. Because here, in chapter 72 of Canto 10, Yudhisthira sent his 4 brothers in the 4 directions with divisions of soldiers from the royal family. And here it's describing the challenge horse was sent. Challenge horses were sent in all directions. And the tribute was used to cover the cost of the Rajasuya Yajna. But this is being described. It's confusing. After gaining victory in the battle of Kurukshetra. Now, Grandfather Bhīṣma is lying on a bed of arrows after the Kurukshetra battle. So my understanding is that Grandfather Bhīṣma spoke, he was called upon by Yudhisthira to speak the glories of the greatest personality. He spoke and he spoke and he spoke. And Shishupal couldn't bear it. So then he vilified Krishna. But Grandfather Bhīṣma was there. Grandfather Bhīṣma wasn't present after gaining victory in the battle of Kurukshetra. So I'm confused. Can anybody unconfuse me? I think I may need to consult some learned personalities. I mean, even if there's 2 Rajasuya Yajnas, still, Grandfather Bhīṣma, at least the way the Prabhupada is describing it, the earlier one was when he was still in Indraprastha. He was in Indraprastha. This is chapter 72, 71, 72 of Canto 10. Uddhava said, take care of Jarasandha. Then the Rajasuya Yajna can be done. So Krishna said, very good idea. Everyone else in Sudharma Assembly Hall, what do you think? Very good idea. Everyone agreed. And so the entire assembly, Krishna's queens went with him. 16,000. 108 queens with their 10 sons and 1 daughter. The whole big shebang. The queens in palanquins and all their paraphernalia and yada, yada, yada. Big, long description. And they went to Indraprastha. They received a big festival, receiving Krishna and situating everybody in the residential quarters. Krishna stayed for 4 months. During that time that Krishna stayed for 4 months, that's when this incident happened with the burning of the Khandava forest. And Maya Danava was spared. He took shelter of Arjuna. And then he wanted to reciprocate with Arjuna. Arjuna said, I don't need anything. Krishna said, what you can do is, you have skill, you can build an assembly hall at Indraprastha. This is so during that 4 months that Krishna was in Indraprastha. While he was building, while Mayadanava was gathering the ingredients for the building of the Sudharma Assembly Hall, Krishna went back. While he went back to Dwarka, one of his queens, Kalindi, who was found in that same place in the Khandava forest, when he was with Arjuna, etc., etc. They were married in Dwarka. And when the Sudharma, when the assembly hall for the for Yudhishthira was completed, Krishna came back. And it was like a mystical place, and that's where Duryodhana was invited, and it's when he fell into a pool when he thought it was land. So this is before the Kurukshetra battle. When Krishna went to Indraprastha. So the chronology is a little confusing. Because this is speaking of it could have been there was a preliminary Rajasuya and then the final Rajasuya. Huh? It's quite possible, the preliminary, something like what was being to be done for Lord Ramachandra, crowning him as Prince Regent before he would actually become king. So like a double first, like an engagement ceremony and then a marriage. A ceremony and then a ceremony. So maybe that's it. And during the first of the Rajasuyas, that's when Bhīṣma was there, and that's when Shishupal was killed, shortly after Jarasandha was killed. And then after the Kurukshetra battle, the final anointment of Yudhishthira as the king. And for that to happen, all the demoniac kings were already annihilated. So the favorable kings were all that were left, but sending challenging horses, so maybe it's the second Rajasuya. I'll see if some scholars can verify. But it does say, the royal and learned orders, and in that great assembly, Lord Sri Krishna was worshipped by one and all as the most exalted personality of Godhead. This happened during my presence. And Prabhupada then is saying, after the Kurukshetra battle, victory had been won. He's on a battlefield. He's on a bed of arrows. Help. I'm going to see if some scholars could have an ironing board. A nice iron can take care of those wrinkles. Okay, Grandfather Bhīṣma is about to depart in 2 more verses. He finishes speaking. He's speaking before the assembly, and then it's going to describe by the power of mystic yoga that he had, he withdrew his senses, consolidated his senses inwardly, pratyahara, dhyan, dharana, and samadhi. In samadhi, he fixed his mind on the personality of Godhead, left his body, and he attained Mahavaikuntha. He was a worshipper of Narayana, very clearly expressed. Although he knew Krishna in his different features, including his features in Vrindavan, and his love of the devotees in Vrindavan, and the love of the gopis for Krishna in Vrindavan, his particular bhav, his particular mood, was loving that four-armed form of Narayana in Vaikuntha. And that's where he went. So we'll continue tomorrow. So let's see if there's some discussion besides the chronology question. Grandfather Bhīṣma. while we're waiting, here's something. I'll say one more thing. This is Canto 1. In Canto 6, there's the story of Ajamila. Ajamila was born in a Brahmin family, and was trained very nicely, and was a grahasta, and was doing all those Brahminical duties. But one day, he was gathering ingredients for fire yajna in the forest, and lo and behold, there was a drunk Shudra and Sudrani going at it. And he became very attracted, lustfully attracted. And he became lustful towards the young prostitute. And he started cohabiting with the young prostitute. And his whole life went downhill. And he had many children with the prostitute. And at the time of death, the agents of Yamaraj came to take him away to Yamaraj for all of his sinful activities, because his wealth was not from Brahminical work. He started becoming a plunderer and a robber and a bad person, a dacoit. So they came to take him to Yamaraj for sentencing. Because of his childhood upbringing, he named his son Narayana. So when he was being approached by the Yamadutas, he called out for his son, Narayana, Narayana, very fearful. And because of his childhood or youth activities as a Brahmin, he remembered the actual Narayana. And so the agents of Narayana came and stopped the Yamadutas, leave him alone. Long discussion between the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas. The Yamadutas went back to Yamaraj and said, who are those people? I mean, who has ever stopped death anyways? We never heard of such a thing. And I thought you were the supreme. But are there two supremes? That would be a problem. Can't be two supremes. Are you not supreme? Please enlighten us. And Yamaraj is one of the great authorities, and he then explained it's not easy to understand who is supreme. One needs to understand who is supreme from these great 12 authorities. He was one, he named himself at the end, but Bhīṣmadeva is one of the 12 great authorities, Mahajans. Mahajanas, great personalities, great authorities in the history of all mankind. Mahajana. There's this phrase that Prabhupada repeat, Mahajana yena katha sapanta. In Mahabharata, there's a situation where the Pandavas were in the forest, they became very thirsty, they wanted some water, they found there was a lake, they went to get a lake. A voice said, don't drink the lake, don't drink the water from the lake. You know, they're the Pandavas, so they took water from the lake and they fell to the ground as if unconscious or dead or something. Yudhisthira came, he heard the voice, he stopped. And from the lake came a yaksha. A yaksha. And the yaksha said, you have to answer my questions. And it was Yamaraj in the disguise of a yaksha. And he asked many questions, and one of the many questions he asked is, in Scripture, there are sometimes contradictory instructions when one thing is not to be done, and according to another indication of Scripture, the same thing is to be done. So how do you decide? When you're in a conflicting situation, how do you decide? And Yudhishthira's answer to the Yaksha was, you're right, it's very difficult. And sometimes you can't sort it out. Therefore, you have to refer to the Mahajans. Mahajana, Yena, Gata, or Gati, Sapanta, the path to the goal is to be revealed by the Mahajans. So, the Yaksha liked that. That was the right answer. When it's sometimes not easy to discern what's the path of virtue. Because something is not to be done, and the same something is to be done by different rules or vidhis of scripture, what to do. Mahajana yena kata sampanta. So any comments? I have something more I can say. I can give an example of conflicting principles and how to decide. Go ahead.
One question I had, Guru Maharaj. Like in Rajasuya Yajna, coincidentally today morning and only I happened to read this pastime where Shishupal is blaspheming Krishna. And in every Leela of Krishna, he is finding something to prove him as an ordinary person, basically. So, like in that assembly, there were many such people who saw Krishna as an ordinary person.
Yes.
But there were also those who were 100% convinced that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yes.
So, like, I was thinking that in my own life, sometimes it might happen that I may not understand the divinity or the divinity of Krishna's plans and take it like ordinary, or the personalities who come in our lives think of them as ordinary. So how to be cautious about this, and also how to go beyond this?
Well, how to be cautious is to be cautious. Be cautious because you know I have coverings. I'm looking at the world through filters. The filters of the modes of nature. There's a blue one, there's a red one, there's a yellow one, but none of it is clear, it's all filtered. So whatever I'm perceiving, it's faulty. I have defects, the 4 defects. So that's the basis of caution is knowing my defectiveness. Still, we have to use our discerning capacity, yet we should know that our discerning capacity is limited and colored or covered. So my perceptions, my reckonings are going to be less than perfect because that's me. I'm less than perfect. So the caution is don't reach firm conclusions knowing you're less than perfect. So then what? Then you go to the perfect. Who is perfect? Personality of Godhead is perfect. Or those who have taken full shelter in disciplic succession through the Supreme Perfect. We can take their words. Now, I may not understand, so my caution is, I know that I'm less than perfect, and I have confidence that there is a Supreme Perfect Person, and there are those that transparently represent the Supreme Perfect Person. So I may not understand, but I'm not going to draw conclusions, knowing that my understanding is less than perfect because of the coverings. Until that wonderful day comes when every consciousness is pure, 100% pure, not kind of, but 100%. Until then, my understandings are going to be less than perfect. Realization is even another thing. but just even the understanding is going to be less than perfect. It's not how do I be cautious. You be cautious knowing that you're less than perfect. And in course of time, through pure, one of the ways that's helpful is step back, maybe 3 steps, if not 10 steps, and take a look at your life and say, this is where I was, and this is where I am today. And there's a big, big, big difference between where I was and where I am today. Through the means of purification. So it's effective, and I'm not there yet. So continue with the process of purification.
Thank you.
Hi, Krishna.
Yeah, it's a small question I have. I'm very new to this. I did not read much Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, but my basic question is, when we meet with people, like maybe the new people or maybe the people who know, right? They might have both positivity and negativity in them, right?
Yes.
But how to? I don't want their negativeness to come into my life anyway. At the same time, how to get rid of that negativeness, or maybe how to make them
In
react
somebody else or in yourself?
from somebody else.
Somebody else.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you have to become an agent or an instrument. Nimitta matram bhavya sabya sachin. In the language of Bhagavad Gita,
Okay,
nimitta means instrument.
okay,
So become an instrument of the Supreme Pure, and then there can be the possibility of transformation of others towards purity from the negativity. It's not a guarantee that it's going to happen, but it'll be possible. The more you become not a dull instrument, but a sharp instrument, a good instrument.
okay.
It's a very simple example. Supposing there's electricity running through you, and someone touches you, they get electrified.
Right.
When there's spiritual energy, spiritual devotion to Krishna running through you, then you become an instrument by which others can get spiritual energy or spiritual devotion to Krishna. Just by you're receiving good association, you can be then a transmitter of good association.
Yes.
The opposite also works. Supposing somebody is asymptomatic of COVID, but they're carrying COVID,
Right.
they can infect many people.
Unknowingly, yes.
Prabhupada told the story of, I don't know if you know this in India, but Typhoid Mary. You've heard the story, Typhoid Mary?
No.
There was a typhoid epidemic, and it was spreading all over the place. So the medical scientists wanted to find out how is this happening. And they traced it down to there's a lady named Mary, and she was teeming with typhoid infection, but she was asymptomatic. And Mary, as she went from here to there to the next place, was widely spreading typhoid. So they had to isolate Mary to stop the epidemic from spreading further. So that's on the negative side. And then the positive side. If one is a papa vidham in the language of the Ishopanishad, if one is purified, then one can have that purifying effect on others. Your circle of people that you move in. You can't, it's not a guarantee. Some people want to hold on to their stuff, their negativity, and etc. Their harshness and their anger and stuff. They want to hold on to it. Or it's like deeply ingrained. So, but still, gradually, by association, by giving good association, as a result of having received good association, then it can be beneficial. And then meanwhile, we don't go around judging people, oh, you're this and you're that. We just try to be representative of Krishna. That's the nimitta mantra, become my instrument. That was what Krishna said to Arjuna. Become Krishna's instrument. So make your Krishna connection, and then you can connect others to that same spiritual potency. Even though you're not electricity, you stick your fingers in an electric socket and someone touches your hand, they're going to get an electric shock. Okay, something else? You're holding the microphone as if you want to say something further.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I mean, I agree with your words, but how to make it in the current world we are in, and especially with our day-to-day lives, right? I mean,
It's the moving to what I described as gradual.
okay.
It's not like a quick fix. Take a tablet
Okay.
and presto.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not like that.
Yeah.
Becoming like we are has taken some time.
Right.
Moving to where we want to be is going to take some time. And applying proper principles. And so there it starts with some faith, a Tao Shraddha. There is putting it really simple, saying as you put it, day to day. I have some faith that there's a higher reality. I have some faith. This is me as a college kid. There must be people that are not like the people of this world. They don't like it. And they want to be different. They want to be good. There must be, I was saying, there must be people like me. I don't like this man's inhumanity to man, harshness and bitterness, and there must be people like me, and I want to find where those people are. I mean, I was this very idealistic college kid. But that's what I want. I have faith that there is such a thing. I have faith that there is a higher reality. Three things. I have faith that there's a higher reality. I know that I don't know, and I want to know. That's the starting point. Then you connect with something that connects you to that higher reality. And then you run into things that are not genuine, and you roll those out into things that are genuine. And you accept those things, and you spend time, invest consciousness in genuine things. And then gradually. So that's day to day. So over a period of time, and there's a nice example in the Bhagavatam. The example in the Bhagavatam is, it's a comparison, at yata tata. As a person who has been fasting, they feel something. They feel weakness, they feel hunger, and fatigue. But that when they break the fast, slowly strength comes back to the body, hunger subsides, and at a certain point they're satisfied. Someone can say, would you like some more of this or some more of that? Say, no. That's a practical experience. So similarly, yata tata, similarly, by the process of hearing and association through sound, three things happen. desire to be in service to the Supreme awakens. Para Isha Anubhav, Para Isha, the Supreme Controller, Anubhav, feelings towards the Supreme. And the third, Viraktir, Anyatra, detachment from other things. Viraktir, Anyatra, detachment from stuff, worldly stuff. So, if I'm with people that are, unpleasant, and, negative people, Viraktir, detachment. Not like I don't care, but it's like I'm not impacted negatively by them either. Why? Because there's a sense of fullness within. And there's a contentment and fullness within. And that's this Para Isha Anubhav. And that stays with me. There's a joy that's within. It can't be taken away by unwholesome association. It's there. Not created by or destroyed by. Something material, something that's within. And I just like to serve. I like to serve Krishna. I like to cook for Krishna. I like to play flute for Krishna. I like to do stuff, do what my psychophysical nature things for Krishna. I like to be a mother for Krishna. I like to be let's learn Bhagavad Gita for attraction for Krishna. It starts to awaken through sound, gradually. And that's day to day. It's a gradual day to day cultivation. Anukulyena Krishnanu Shilanam. It's a gradual cultivation. From where I am to where I want to be. And following vidhis, to standard practices. In good association. And gradually. Then the day-to-day, what happens day-to-day may not change, but how you experience day-to-day is definitely going to change. The consciousness inside is going to change. And therefore, how you speak, how you feel, how you carry yourself, your demeanor, your steadiness, your sense of compassion, sense of tolerance, and when necessary, to be strong, but to be strong as is necessary, not just reacting like, lashing out because I don't like it. But, from a position of service to Krishna. I was just in Portland for 9 days, and we discussed the whole Dhruva story. You know Dhruva Maharaj? Dhruva?
Yeah.
Dhruva.
Maharaj.
Dhruva.
Yeah.
Dhruva?
It's a star, right? Nakshatra. Yeah.
Dhruva, the son of Uttanapada.
Yeah.
So he was insulted by his stepmother. And there's the whole first section is react or respond. He was hurt very badly by your harsh words. And his father said nothing because he was so much attached to his co-wife, his co-queen, that he didn't say anything when she spoke so harshly. She deliberately, loud enough so he would hear it, she said really harsh things. And he said nothing. Dhruva burst into tears, lips trembling, went running to his mother, climbed on her lap, 5-year-old boy. She heard from the people who were in the royal palace what had happened. She was very hurt. Cruel words to a little boy. But she didn't lose it. She didn't react. She wanted to respond. So what did she do? She started instructing her son, live by higher principles. then, and so on. So because she was carrying, she had feelings, but she was managing her feelings with higher principle. Her son said, I'm the eldest son. I'm destined to become the next king, but I want a kingdom better than my father. I want a kingdom better than my father's father. I want a kingdom better than my father's father's father. She said, Lord Vishnu, you should go to Lord Vishnu and take shelter of him, because that's how your great-grandfather, Lord Brahma, achieved all what he achieved. It's how your grandfather, Swayambhuva Manu, achieved what he achieved. So you want something that's even beyond them, Lord Vishnu. And then she started describing his features. She was a devotee. She had love. And she wanted to transmit that love that she had to her son so he wouldn't react, but could respond. Take shelter of Lord Vishnu. Anyway, that's because she was supermom. She was like a guru to her little boy, because she had the qualifications. So without qualification, we're kind of like maybe not liking the situation, but we can't handle the situation as well as we could if there was a deeper sense of bhakti. Bhakti parishano bhavo viraktir anyatra syat. And it comes just from hearing in good association. That's the verse of the Bhagavatam. And it's true. Canto 4. You have a Bhagavatam set here? You have a Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam in your home? Someday you should get a Srimad Bhagavatam set in your home and start to read it. You too. You like.
Yeah.
You like. Very uplifting. 5 chapters of the Dhruva story, Canto 4. Once you practice, once you have experience of becoming familiar with Srimad Bhagavatam, what happens is not just information, but it sits in your heart, and you experience the world differently. It's not like, quickly you become perfect, but you experience the world is what the world is, and your experience of the world is changed, transformed internally. It's that kind of literature. Ramayana is similar, and Bhagavatam is especially revered. Anything you want to contribute to this discussion?
In real life, as you mentioned, God and demigod, so when they are trying to talk each other, so it's not easy to understand, what's the, right decision. Sometimes it's almost conflicting decisions. Is it doing the self-realization or impurities removal? What is the best way to, judge a situation? How do we come out of conflict decisions?
Yes, this is now, the question is specific in decision making, right?
Decision making, right decision making.
I'll say just a couple things very simply,
Sure.
and then accomplishing them is more than simply. The checkpoint for devotees of the Lord is 3: Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. And above the Guru and Sadhu is Shastra. But how to understand? That's like her question. How to understand? I'm reading Shastra, but I may be reading it with filters. So therefore I need guidance of how to discern properly. So Guru and sadhus and Shastra. Now supposing there's a complex situation that's in front of me, and I'm not yet sufficiently versed in Shastra, and I don't have a guru sitting next to me. What do I do? Yeah, so you do the best you can, but try, and as you mature spiritually, you become more familiar. Just naturally, when you become more familiar with what the great personalities have said. This is this statement from Mahabharata. Mahajana, the Yaksha asked Yudhishthira, your question. Sometimes there's conflicting indications and how you to decide. And Yudhishthira said, it's true. Therefore you need to refer to the Mahajans. You can say that's sadhus, the most exalted personalities of all time. What standard do they display and teach by their example? Just because I spent all this time, I spent 9 days, I mean, probably 30 hours on Dhruva, so it's like fresh. He heard it from his mother what to do. He had faith in his mother's word. And then he wanted to know how to find Vishnu. She said, I don't know. I'm just in the palace, but I've heard sages, they go to the forest, and they find Vishnu. He said, very well. I'm leaving for the forest right now. Angry. Revenge. Kshatriya spirited little boy, 5-year-old boy. Super soul in his heart is the same super soul in Narada Muni's heart. Super soul prompted Narada, go visit Dhruva. The son of the king is off in the forest looking for Vishnu. Go give him association. This is the Sadhu Sangha principle. So, Narada went. And Dhruva he hadn't met Narada Muni before, but just being in his presence, he could understand. He's sadhu. So with folded palms, the 5-year-old boy from a royal family offered respect. Narada touched his head. He felt purified just by the touch of his hand. And then there's many other things that happened. Narada examined him, found, yes, this boy is really determined. Dhruva said, all the advice you've given me is very good, perfect. The problem is, an arrow has pierced my heart with the harsh words of my stepmother, and my heart is broken. So your words don't stay there. They leak out like a broken pot. I want a kingdom. And you're a sadhu. And my mother said the personality of Godhead is the way to get that kingdom. Can you help me? How to give me an honest process by which I can approach the personality of Godhead to get that kingdom. And Narada said, well, this boy is really determined. So he gave him a process. He followed the process. And he went on the other side of his material aspiration, get back, anger, Kshatriya, little boy thing. So he was on the fast track. He got that attainment very quickly. Most of us not so quickly. But the principles that were given by Narada are the same for us. So the discerning capacity for Dhruva was taken away because he was covered with Rajagun, a Kshatriya spirit. And I'm not going to take this from my stepmother. I'll show her. He got relief. So when he got relief, then he could discern properly. So back to your question. Without purity, we're not going to be able to discern properly, and that's just the way it is. So we associate with those that are more pure than we are, clearly fixed in principles of purity, and we try to abide by their advice, kind of like father and son. I mean, in an ideal circumstance, a qualified father is qualified to deliver the son from birth and death. And the son wants to know. Narada wanted to know from Dhruva. Dhruva wanted to know from Narada. I can't give up this anger. I'm a Kshatriya in spirit, and the advice you're giving is the advice for someone in the mode of goodness. It doesn't stay in my heart. So can you give me some Kshatriya remedy? So he did. And then he became free. Then he became very clear. But through sadhu sangha, then clarity can be achieved. Until then, we try to be honest and virtuous as much as we have an understanding of what that is, knowing we're going to make some mistakes. Dhruva made some mistakes, but he got relieved from those mistakes by sadhu sangha and following. Thus, it's gradual. Anything from you? It's all new. It's so much new to you, right? Too many names and a lot of history, and
Yeah.
is it puzzling?
I mean, like, I have some idea on some things, but
Okay, go ahead.
the more intricacies, all the background, I haven't heard
Yeah,
it all.
there's histories.
Right. Well, not related to that though, but I do have a question.
Yeah.
So when you're going from point A to point B, and like there's many steps to get along the way, how do
Yeah.
you not forget the goal?
Great question. Well, association with someone who knows the goal, and if you forget the goal, they can tap you on the shoulder and say, or just ask, hey, do you remember what the goal is? Huh? I'm so absorbed in doing step number 15. I've really forgotten what the goal is. Let me see now. What's the goal? And life is like that. So, but here's a question before that question. What's point B? Meaning, what's the goal of life? Like, let's just say, in your age, maybe it's, I don't know, doing well in academics so that you could get entrance into a really good college and do really well in what you're doing. I was just at somebody's home. There's a girl in Portland that's going to UT, Austin, and she's not only, she's on a medical track, but it's not just like what I did when I was on a medical track. I was majoring in biochemistry. She's majoring in neurology. I said, that's like graduate school, no? She said, no. Now it's an undergraduate major, neurology. First year student in neurology. Wow. What's your GPA? 4.0. So she has a goal, but what's the goal of life? Is becoming a neurologist a goal of life? No, so there's steps from point A to point B. What's point B? Are you sure it's point B? Or are you sure it's not like A plus 15? It's not really point B. What I'm saying here is, in another section of the Srimad Bhagavatam is Canto 7, is the story of Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu and Lord Nrsingadev. And so Prahlad says to his father wants to know from Prahlad, what's the best thing that you've learned in school? And Prahlad says, Nat te vidu svartikatemi Vishnu. He said, persons like you who are too much attached to the bodily conception of life, you don't know what the best thing is. Na te vidu. Vid means to know. Sva arta, your self-interest. You don't really know what your self-interest is. And that's Vishnu. So the goal is Vishnu. The self-interest is attaining Vishnu. So for this girl that's, the first year neurology student, moving into her second year, the goal isn't just to become a neurologist. The mission of human life is, okay, it's a profession, some skill in that profession, maybe she'll specialize in some kind of field of neurology. Fantastic, very good. Bright girl, very focused on. So if you're clear what the goal is, then it's easy to take steps to get there and not forget the goal because you're clear what the goal is. You know who you are. That's the starting point, and then the goal. That clarity. It's a little bit like what your mom is asking, what your dad is asking. It's having a clear sense of who you are, and then the purpose of me, the purpose of my being, is not the covering, it's this soul within. That's Bhagavad Gita. The soul within is not different than the covering. So we have our nature. This neurologist student has her nature. Bright girl. I mean, her lights are on. Just looking at her face, she's a very bright person. And very confident. And competent. But that's not who she is. Not just a bright, competent neurologist student on her way to, a fabulous career, I'm sure. But that's not who she is, and that's not the mission of life. So then how are you going to get that? It's, by wisdom literature, and those that are well versed in it and live by it. That's how you're going to get that. And you have that association. I mean, she's got her association with her professors and skilled people, a curriculum that matches her interests, and she'll stay strapped on, I'm sure. Very confident. Unless she gets derailed with something emotional, who knows. But by association, you can stay fixed on what your goal is as you're taking the steps. And those that are not just like, skilled, but they're persons who are wholesome. And they'll care enough to extend themselves if you start to head for the ditch or into a zone of unwholesomeness or forgetfulness or distracted, too much distracted. They'll give association in a way that will help you get back. And wisdom literature, your father is scripture, Guru Sadhu Shastra. That's the guide for the goal of life. Let me ask you this question. Supposing this young girl wants to be a neurologist, and I'm sure it's very time-consuming and very taxing academically. Supposing she thinks, gosh, if I start immersing myself in a regular way of reading Bhagavad Gita, I'll have less time for my academics, and I'm really focused on my academics. A or B, if she takes some time, invests some time in becoming more clear of who she is on the spiritual platform, her academic performance will be enhanced. Or B, by spending that time in trying to understand who she is by reading Bhagavad Gita, it'll distract her from her academic work, and she may decline in her performance academically. My experience, subjectively and with others, is when there's spiritual well-being, the material well-being is enriched. And conversely, those that have material well-being, but there's paucity in spiritual well-being, that's where you're going to lose who you are and the higher purpose of life, and become more materialistic and become influenced by materialistic people that don't have high values. And then, the skill that one may develop or acquire gets misused. And then other bad habits, bad behavior, bad speech, bad decisions will creep in. And it'll cause more problems than you can imagine. Life gets complex when you start going into dark spaces. So stay in spaces of light while pursuing the shorter term goals than the ultimate goal, the ultimate purpose. It's not difficult. I would say neglect of spiritual well-being, that's difficult. Nurturing spiritual well-being along with my shorter term goals, that's wholesome. And to maintain wholesomeness. I don't know if that's the answer that you were expecting, but that's my answer. Huh?
That's the clarity he needs at this time.
Well, we all need. I need. We all need. That there's a tendency, it's a material tendency, that we get so involved with a step in the direction of where we want to go that we lose track of where we want to go. It's common. It's everyday stuff. So that's your question. How do you keep track of where you want to go? It's mode of goodness. Then in mode of goodness, I know who I am, I know what the goal is, and that mode of goodness will maintain my sense of remembrance of where I want to go, and then how to get there. Not shortcuts or cheating or, flim-flam. It's not really the genuine thing. I'm just like doing something cosmetic because it looks good. But integrity is lost and character is lost. And so mode of goodness will maintain, and there's this mode of goodness is that's what it's a Brahmana lives by those characteristics of goodness. When you're in the quality of goodness, you'll maintain remembrance of what your goal is. Passion, it can easily get distracted. Ignorance, it's lost right away. Mode of goodness. And how to cultivate mode of goodness. I mean, there's a Gita camp for kids that's taking place in Naperville, and it's for not people your age, but children. And it's chapter 14, the modes of nature, and the importance of cultivating the quality of goodness. And it starts when kids are young. And when goodness is there, then the maintenance, you'll remember what your goals are and how to get there in a virtuous way and not shortcuts and not cheating, not pretense. Strong, clear, bright, clean, mode of goodness. Anything from you? No? Okay. You're asking your son if he wants to ask something? Microphone? Pass the microphone.
Since I'm going to 6th grade, I'm going to a new school. Usually, if you have to fit in with people, I mean, you have to say like bad words or something. Do you know how I can deal with that?
How to deal with other kids when they speak bad words? That's your question?
Yeah.
What's your nature? Are you tolerant or intolerant?
Tolerant?
You're tolerant.
Yeah.
Because if that's your nature, you tolerate, and then you try to set a good example. Instead of bad words back, because then you're becoming like them, so don't do bad words back. Smile. And be the kind of person that you would like them to be. You've heard that phrase before? It's something that Gandhi said. Be that kind of person you'd like the world to be. You follow?
Yeah.
So, smile and say, these poor kids that they think it's cool to say bad things. It's really hurtful to them and hurtful to those who hear those bad things. It's really unfortunate. So feel some concern and compassion, and then try to be the example of the right thing, or a virtue. Be a virtuous person.
Okay.
If these people that say bad things see that you're consistently smiling and you're saying good things, kind things, compassionate things, they'll take notice. They may even pick on you and say, oh, let's try to get them. But you just stay strong, like a tree. More trinadapi sunichena taror. Taror means tree. More tolerant than a tree. You smile. And do good things and speak good things and do acts of kindness for others and be that kind of example amongst your peers.
Okay.
And then you'll attract people like that. You'll have good, wholesome friends. And you won't be fun anymore for the people that say bad things. So they'll just go stay with the people that say bad things and they'll leave you alone. Just make wholesome friends. And smile. Be happy.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not easy to do, it's easy to say, but that's an ideal option. Understand what good character is and live by it. What I just said is exactly what Dhruva Maharaj's mother said to him. If you need the strength, then you get strength from the source of strength. What's the source of strength? Balaram. He's the source of strength. He'll give you strength. You just ask him. He's got a lot of strength. So be a person of strong character by association with Balaram. Ask him, pray to him. It's hard. I'm with these people that say bad things. I don't like it. I need some strength from you so I can represent you nicely and stay happy. It's real. It's real. Not imaginary. It's real. Okay?
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Okay, I think that's it. Something online?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. This question is from Girivardhari Das Prabhu. He says, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, if there is something to be done, if we input from senior Vaishnavas and follow it as instructed, does that fall in vikarma?
Vikarma?
Vikarma.
No, why? Why would it fall? No. The answer is no.
Then there is a question from Shri Padma Manjari Mataji. She says, Guru Maharaj, was Brihadratha a righteous king?
What's what?
Brihadratha.
The predecessor?
Brihadratha. Brihadratha, the king. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is he a righteous king?
Why?
Yeah, she wants to know if he is a righteous king.
We don't have any idea of whether he was righteous or not.
Okay.
He was a king.
Yeah. There is a follow-up question. She says, is it right to say that Jarasandha became corrupted because of greed, envy, so he became a demon?
No.
Or was he demon from the start?
Well, there's no indication that he became corrupted, but perhaps he became corrupted. There's no indication, so I can't say. Other than he was definitely a demon, and whether it was from the get-go or he became like that, there's no indication that I'm aware of. Okay?
Yeah. That's all, Maharaj.
Okay, that's it.
Before this Rajasuya Yajna, there was this topic of Jarasandha also that I was reading. So Krishna asked him about these kings that he had imprisoned. So Krishna told him that you are doing, this is not proper. So he said that
Krishna told to whom?
Jarasandha, when they went to fight with him, he wanted Bhima to have fight with him. So Jarasandha said that I won them with my power. So what is wrong in that? But he was going to sacrifice them also.
Yes.
So although, according to moral conducts and in this Kali Yuga, people might say that, okay, this is fair means of...
Because I'm powerful, I'm just using my power. What's wrong with that?
Right, but morally that's not right. And
Well, there's other criterion besides I'm powerful, so that makes me right. Might makes right.
right.
That's not right. That's not a scriptural teaching.
So that's a demoniac mentality.
Yes, he was definitely a demon. You don't sacrifice people.
Exactly.
Or
Just-
might makes right. That's also
Yeah.
demoniac.
Yeah.
That's, Stalin. Might makes right. Very cruel person. Modern Jarasandha. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Very interesting evening.